I've lived in 2 African countries. I was born in the Central Highland region of Kenya in a small town called Nyeri that looks out over Mount Kenya, the second highest mountain in Africa. And when I was 7, my family and I moved to South Africa. Last month, I went back to Kenya on a 2-week holiday. And we went to the northern county of Laikipia with Peter, our Maasai spotter. And then we went down to the coastal region of Kenya. We then flew back from Nairobi to Johannesburg. And on that flight, it made me realize that our countries are so different. We arrived back in Johannesburg with its good infrastructure, excellent road system, 3 world-class airports, a fast train that takes you from OR Tambo International Airport into Sandton, the financial hub of Southern Africa. But we arrived back to a complex social world where xenophobia and gender-based violence had reared their ugly heads again. So why am I telling you this? Many Africans living in countries, in continents other than Africa, speak about the single story of Africa and the single story of African identity. A single story is where one views people or peoples as one thing, thereby creating stereotypes. Chimamanda Adichie, in her 2009 TED Talk, speaks about the danger of a single story. So the dangers of single stories are not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. The dangers of single stories are that they become the only story. So what is the single story of Africa? It is one of poverty, destruction, civil war, a continent that is lacking. This is an incomplete story. South Africa is a country of contrasts. We have the ignominious position of being the most unequal country in the world. So World Bank says that all countries have inequality, but that South Africa is the starkest example. So what are the reasons for this? Well, it is multifaceted. There is lack of affordable housing in urban areas. There's unemployment. There's the issue of land and land ownership. So in 25 years of democracy, there is much dissatisfaction with the slow pace of socio-economic change. At school level, Vijay Reddy, who's a special research scientist at the Human Sciences Research Council, has said there has, in her review of educational priorities in the last 25 years of State of the Nation addresses, the first given by then President Nelson Mandela, says that there has been much success in early childhood development. So the expansion of this program has been successful. Social protection has been on a good rise. In 2006, no-fee schools were introduced, and this has now been expanded to most public schools, which enables children to stay in school longer. Government has mostly delivered on infrastructure. However, there are still 100 schools to be built. 9,000 schools use pit latrines, and there are 300 schools that do not have electricity. So there is still much work to be done. However, the focus now needs to change to resources for teaching and learning, because the quality of our education is not good. So the quality of education remains elusive. Reading for meaning is a huge problem. In the most recent progress in international reading studies showed that 78% of our grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning. A teacher will stand in front of a class. Classes are sometimes 30, 40, 50, 60 pupils. They are crammed into desks. They share books. The pupils read in a sing-song fashion. The teacher will correct pronunciation. Reading continues. Pupils are assessed entirely on their ability to read correctly. They are not asked about what the story means, about the characters in the story. They are not asked, perhaps, to finish the ending of a story and make it different in a creative way. So they are taught as their teachers were taught. So how do we change this cycle? Well, one way would be to have an emphasis on reading pedagogy at in-service training and both at teacher education courses at university. I am on the board of an organization called Thinking Schools South Africa. The core mandate of Thinking Schools South Africa is to develop the infusion of thinking skills into teaching and learning using whole school implementation. This is Elmarie Peterson. She is a trainer for Thinking Schools South Africa. She teaches at a school in Bellville, which is just outside Cape Town. And children are bused in there from Khayelitsha. Many of these children are refugee children. So they come from a very difficult socio-economic background. They speak up to 9 languages. So at her school, she realized that critical thinking is not required in less advantaged schools. But this became an area of contention in their staff room because many teachers said that these children should have an easy time at school because they have such a difficult time at home. But Elmarie realized that if you don't have high expectations, then children won't rise to those expectations. So she started an intervention and she introduced some thinking strategies. And this is a quote from what she said. "The thinking strategies allowed the learners in my class to meet higher expectations, become aware of the possibility within them, and strive to improve their own circumstances. These strategies open the mind and allow for growth on a much deeper level than normal, as well as significantly improving academic results." So the intervention she used are thinking maps, as developed by David Hiley. These are concrete images of abstract thoughts. So what learners have to do is go through text or photos, pictures, find keywords and put them down into one of these 8 thinking maps. The 8 thinking maps relate to Piaget's 8 cognitive processes. So this helps students to organize their thinking. It helps make their thinking visible. It allows them to engage in higher order thinking by analyzing, by going through text and finding keywords. And so this is the intervention that they used at Bellville Primary School. This is an example of one of her grade 6 learners. So this is a thinking map comparing and contrasting the lines of longitude and the lines of latitude. So the similarities are in the circles down the center, and the differences are on the outside. So you can see that from a map like this, it is far easier to remember the key words because it is a visual representation. You can see there is use of color as well. So for the pupil, the grade 6 pupil, to then go and write a paragraph from this or to develop a presentation allows them to not plagiarize, which is a big thing, and also just to help structure their thinking in a better way. So the results of this intervention, which is only one of the interventions at Bellville Primary School, if we look at the home language, so this is systemic pass rate for national exams done at grade 6 level. And you'll notice that in 2013, it was just over 50%, whereas going up to 2015, over 70%. That is a rise of 20%, which is highly significant. So it was a very successful intervention. I thought I would now just take you to a completely different context, and that is the school in which I teach. So I teach at a girls' independent school in Johannesburg. I have been head of cognitive education there for the last 10 years. We go from grade 0 to grade 12, and our girls have explicit lessons in thinking from grade 0 to grade 10 every week. So we teach them how to think, not what to think, but how to think. So one of the strategies we use are Art Costin Bina Calix, 16 Habits of Mind. So the habits of mind are thinking dispositions, and these are what intelligent people use when they are confronted with problems to which they do not know the answer. So the unit of work I've just done with our grade 8s, we focus on one at a time, and we get our pupils to get better and better at these habits of mind. So we focused on number 3, which is listening with understanding and empathy. So in a previous lesson, they would have done a strategy called pause, paraphrase, probe. So we say to them, if you're going to listen with understanding, you need to listen with intent. So you need to pause your brain. In other words, don't think up an answer or a reply when somebody is talking to you. You need to listen carefully. The paraphrase is you repeat back what that person has said to make sure that you have understood them correctly. And then you can probe. You can ask for clarification, or you can disagree, you can agree, you can open up the conversation. So the task that we gave the grade 8s was to research the issue of xenophobia in South Africa, make suggestions on what we can do going forward. And I can tell you that 5 years ago, we would never have suggested on having such a difficult conversation about such a difficult topic with grade 8s. So the thinking skills have enabled us to do that. And at grade 8 level, we also want them to make suggestions on going forward so that there's always hope, there's always a way out of a difficult situation. We want them to keep a reference list so that they come from an informed point of view, not just from opinions on social media. And they are taught in their IT lessons to be careful of fake news. So we want them to be careful of that and to choose reliable resources. We used De Bono's thinking hats to give them structure to their conversation so they would work in groups of 5 or 6. So they normally start off with the blue hat, which is the metacognitive hat, which makes them plan the way that they are going to structure their conversations. So they use one hat at a time, and all of them discuss that hat, and that allows for deeper thinking. So, for example, they might start with the white hat, which is about facts. So they would go and find out what xenophobia means. They would find out any data on xenophobia. Then they might move to the black hat, which is about cautionary aspects, difficulties. Then to the red hat, which is about emotions. So what are the emotions of the foreigners coming into South Africa? What are the emotions about the South Africans who are feeling threatened by foreigners? So they would examine that. And most groups then said to me about the yellow hat that they could not think of anything beneficial about xenophobia. And I suggested to them that maybe just opening up the conversation was beneficial, and they could go and speak to parents and people in their community. Green hat was what we wanted them to come up with, which was solutions. So when they finished their discussions, I asked them to do a reflective task, and this comes from Harvard University's visible thinking strategies, and this enables them to think how their thinking might have changed from before they started the task to after the task, and it helps them to consolidate what their understandings and their beliefs are. So I've given 2 examples here. One of our girls wrote, I used to think xenophobia was only South Africans being prejudiced. I thought it was only against illegal immigrants. I thought it was generated by racism. I didn't think there were any solutions. I didn't think it was a very big problem in South Africa. Now I think xenophobia is an international issue. Immigrants boost the economy. It has nothing to do with racism. There is a lot that we as a community can do to stop this. It has killed people living in South Africa. So that's quite profound for a grade 8. The second one wrote, I used to think xenophobia was a result of foreigners leaving their homes for a better life, education, etc. Now I think xenophobia is a result of South Africans not understanding why there are foreigners in South Africa and receiving incorrect information from leaders in their communities about the immigrants' intentions in the country. So I think with the integration of thinking skills and strategies, we are doing quite good work with our girls in our school. And so I would just like to finish with one idea, and that is to say that education is the most important form of social investment that we can make. Thank you.